you say someone who's looking at your application a little bit intimidated, it feels a little different?
We are looking for you to have grabbed our attention. We are looking to read enough to want to know more about you.
Right.
In that 60-second time period, they were actually most likely typing in, asking ChatGPT how to respond. And it was very clear to us that we could see them reading.
Oh, no.
And in some cases, they could not even pronounce some of the words that they were being told to say. This whole process is about giving applicants the opportunity to tell us who they truly are.
The MIT Sloan MBA application is uniquely designed to highlight leadership, collaboration, and innovation, setting it apart from other business schools. Instead of traditional essays, candidates submit a 300-word cover letter to articulate their achievements, goals, and alignment with Sloan's values. And here today with us is my co-host, Jeremy Scheinwald. Hi, Jeremy.
Nice to see you again, Harold.
As well as the Assistant Dean of Admissions, Dawna Levenson. Hi, Dawna.
So Dawna started as an admissions reader 17 years ago and has been the Assistant Dean of Admissions for 6 years, overseeing all MBA admissions, the entire MBA admissions process, and ultimately all the decisions for every single class for 6 years. Quite a lot of leadership cultivated.
Absolutely. One application you did not read was my own.
Okay.
And I graduated in 2001, and the application has changed. And my question for you is sort of the whole why. It looks much different from other business school applications. Like, what's some of your thinking behind that?
Some of our initial thinking is to really understand what information we need to get us to an interview decision.
Okay.
And then once we make that decision, to then ask for additional information to help us then make the decision as to whether or not to admit somebody. Okay. So I would argue reducing some of the barriers. In particular, we've thought a lot about letters of recommendation.
Right.
And how many do we really need? And to be honest, given the fact that more often than, given the fact that we joke around and say the only letter of recommendations we really believe are the ones that are bad. Right. Do we really need 3 or 2? And so we've settled on 1 letter of recommendation. Right. Some of that feedback actually came from some of our alums who themselves are asked to write letters of recommendation. Right. So 1 letter of recommendation, it means you should really think about who that person is who can speak to the impact that you have made or that you are making on your organization. I think a misconception is that your recommender has to have a fancy title, perhaps be the CEO of the company. We're not assessing them. We are truly assessing you, the candidate. And so really important qualities of your recommender is somebody who knows you well, somebody who is willing to take the time to write a meaningful letter of recommendation, somebody who can truly speak to the impact that you have made on the organization.
No, that makes sense. And then you also have something called a cover letter instead of an essay.
Yep. Fundamentally, it is an essay. However, we're a business school. When people are applying for jobs, they are writing a cover letter as to this is why you should hire me. And so we're just sort of mirroring that and saying this is why you should admit me.
Right.
It's really that simple.
No.
Well, it's simple. It's got a very long wind up as a question. It talks a lot about the school. And then it feels like there are, at least to applicants, it feels like there are a lot of moving parts for a question that's really you're only allowed to answer in 300 words or so.
Yep.
The components really are a leadership achievement or 2, and then there's no request for goals. There's no request at all to talk about the future.
Correct.
And should applicants, I think, feel compelled like they must do it?
Yep. And I actually don't blame them. So let me back up a little bit on this as well. We explicitly do not ask, what do you want to do post-MBA, for 2 fundamental reasons. The first is you could tell us anything.
Right.
So how do we validate that?
Right.
The second, though, is that there's a very good chance you're going to change your mind.
Right.
That the nature of the MBA experience itself, which is incredibly transformative, could in fact influence change. So why are we making admissions decisions based on that?
Right.
Having said that, we ask for many components. A lot of them are very standard, such as transcripts, GMAT or GRE scores, those types of things. But I think that there are 4 key components that together can truly tell an applicant's story. And they include a 60-second video introducing yourself to your future classmates. Yes. That's your passionate side. Your resume, which is a lot about your work history and a little bit about your academics. We have recently added a required short question, which is about your personal background, what has happened in your life that has contributed to making you the person you are today.
Okay.
And then there's that cover letter. And the cover letter really wraps it all together and begins to address why MIT Sloan.
Okay.
And so, and I understand this, when you start to talk about why MIT Sloan, it's hard not to talk about what you want to do because you want to show some level of alignment. So I completely understand and probably expect a sentence or two on what it is you hope to do, but it's really no more than that.
So in 300 words, that's an awful lot to accomplish.
It is.
Leadership example, a little bit of a necessity to talk about your goals. And then it's hard to get to that kind of like detailed level about why Sloan. So, I mean, how much depth are you hoping for in there?
So like a cover letter for a job, we are looking for you to have grabbed our attention. We are looking to read enough to want to know more about you.
Right.
And I would argue that's the same thing when you're, again, applying for a job and a cover letter with a job as well.
Right. So when it comes to that lever and you think about why MIT Sloan, what sort of things are you looking for?
I'm looking for evidence that someone has done their homework.
Yeah.
That they understand a bit about perhaps how we're organized, how our curriculum is structured, certain areas where our faculty have been very focused. A generic why is sort of somewhat suspect.
Yes.
And I'm not saying that you have to like represent everything that I just talked about, but some sense that you truly get what makes MIT Sloan unique. In fact, if I may, I'm in the process right now of wrapping up my round one interviews. And more often than not, when I say, what questions do you have for me? People will ask me, well, what uniquely defines your school? And I'm now turning this around on my candidates in my interviews and asking them, so tell me, what is it about MIT Sloan that you find is unique?
Right.
And I love that because it forces them to share really a fundamental understanding, like demonstrating an understanding of what makes our school unique and what they value in terms of what makes it unique.
That makes sense. How does it then fit with the video? The video to me feels very different. If the cover letter feels very business-like, the video feels like, I think you used the word passionate. I mean, how did the two fit together?
So I think what they both are tools that people use in their everyday lives. I think that's sort of part of what the thinking was when we introduced both of them. And it was first the cover letter, and then we've now had the video, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years. We live in a very video-oriented society. Look at us today here, right? Yeah. And so we thought, why not take this vehicle that people use every day as a way for them to communicate with us? And it's really meant to be as creative as you want. This is not production quality by any means. This is most likely you're using your phone, a friend is holding your phone. That's all we're looking for. But from the creativity standpoint, people continue to get more and more creative. My word of caution would be make sure that your creativity does not come at the expense of the audio. So whatever it is you're doing, if you're passionate about skydiving, sure, jump out of a plane with a pro cam, a GoPro, but then make sure we can hear what you're saying. Otherwise, it's a missed opportunity.
From your perspective, then, what makes a good combination? So we have, again, the cover letter, we have the video, we have the org chart, which you haven't spoken about. We also have the resume. It's like, how do all these pieces fit together?
Yeah, well, in the end, they're telling your story. And these are all different tools for an applicant to tell his or her story. And so what makes a good application or a compelling application versus one that's not so much? I think somebody who knows how to use all of these components in a way that they both each adds value on its own, but they reinforce each other as well at the same time.
That makes sense.
And so they're not 4 separate pieces of data at all. They sort of come together with some level of overlapping. And so, maybe this is a basic example, but what your passions are, I would be surprised if they didn't show up on your resume under your interests. That's a little thing, but it sort of connects it. And it's a little thing, but when it's absent, it kind of looks strange.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Oh, this person, in their video, they're so passionate about blah, 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 and yet there's no evidence of it anywhere else.
Right. No, that certainly makes sense. I want to make sure that we would touch on something that for many people, it's the most mysterious part of the application, which is the org chart.
That org chart, not even mysterious. It strikes fear in people's hearts.
I know, and I apologize.
What do I do? Some of it's just very straightforward, and then people worry it's not it's not aesthetically interesting, it's not compelling. It's like, it's an org chart.
So first of all, there are some instructions that come with it. In particular, if your recommender happens to be on it, how to identify them, those types of things. We also say we're not looking for the company org chart. So if you work for Amazon, it's not the one that shows the CEO. It's more of the one of you and your group. I will often say, think of it more like a relationship map.
Okay.
Put your picture in the middle of the page. Do you have direct reports? And if you don't, that's okay too. We have many MBA students who have never supervised others. But if you have them, who are your peers? And it doesn't have to be names. It could be roles. It could be other people in other departments. Who are your peers? Who is your supervisor? Perhaps who's your supervisor's supervisor? It helps just give us some visual context in terms of, what your role is like in terms of engagement with other people. So this is very important. We have never not admitted somebody simply on the basis of their org chart.
Okay.
And I like to say that now because I do feel bad about how much time people actually spend on it.
That's a wonderful thing for people to hear.
I always thought that the org chart is, in case you say you're the CEO, they want to make sure that it's not a one-person company. Sure, let's go with that.
Maybe it's hey, we don't necessarily know what your title means at this particular firm, and so it'd just be good to understand what that means at your
But
firm.
if you are a one-person company, perhaps I would use that org chart as an opportunity to show that you have relationships with customers or suppliers. Again, relationship map probably aligns a little bit better, but org chart again is because of the more of the business side.
Sure, no, that
like if you're the I'm making it up, if you're the junior purchasing manager at a rotational molding company that you've never heard of in Newfoundland, Canada. How do you know where that person is in the org chart? So it gives you some context for okay, I'm the junior purchasing manager. There are, there's only one person above me. There are 50 people above me. I don't know how big is the company. So there's got to be some value, especially for companies that you don't necessarily know as household names.
Absolutely.
Harold kind of touched on this at the beginning, but there's no intentionality around being different. It just sort of evolved that way, as an application. With all these different components, like org chart, cover letter. We haven't even touched on all of them. One recommendation is still pretty rare.
I honestly think our goal really was early on, and a lot of these bigger additions have happened now pre-pandemic, was in some ways to reduce the barriers for candidates to apply to our program. I mean, we completely appreciate that people are applying to multiple schools. And so why not really take the time to think about what is that minimum amount of data that we need in order to make the interview decision? Because we haven't gotten to the interview yet. Once somebody's actually invited for an interview, we're actually asking for more information in addition to the interview itself. But that's from a much smaller set of individuals who at that point have reached the next level and are hopefully eager to provide us with additional information.
So, I mean, was that basically a reaction? It was like, hey, let's slim it down on the front end, and we can ask those people who made the cut for more and get to know them better.
That was a very conscious decision.
That makes sense. Before we jump in a little bit farther in the process, tell me about the new video that's first time this year.
Yep. So the new video is actually an old video for a couple of our other programs. For the Master of Finance and Masters in Business Analytics, we've been asking this randomly generated question for many years. It's embedded in the Slate application itself. It helps assess, ability to think quickly on your feet, a little bit around personal presence, as well as for some of our international students, just their English language ability. That 60-second prepared video, we understand that many people have written a script and have practiced a script. And they're speaking a rehearsed script. We understand that. And so in this case, you don't have that luxury. Interesting fact, up until this year, we had a 60-second lag between, here's your question, you have 60 seconds to think about it, ready, record. What we noticed last year in particular, that in that 60-second time period, again, these are not MBA candidates, these are for other programs, they were actually most likely typing in, asking ChatGPT how to respond. And it was very clear to us that we could see them reading.
Oh, no.
And in some cases, they could not even pronounce some of the words that they were being told to say. And this was supposed to be an off-the-cuff, tell us about a time you had a challenge, you were challenged at work and how did you address it? So We cut that time in the middle from 60 seconds to 10 seconds.
Okay.
And we've tested it. It's real. You have to type really fast to get a 10 seconds for ChatGPT for it to go.
Right.
And again, it's just an additional piece of information for us, for our MBA candidates around presence, thinking quick on your feet, and English language proficiency.
No, that makes sense. And Dawna, sort of red flag here, neon light here. You just mentioned ChatGPT.
Yep.
So how is that affecting either how you think about the cover letter itself or how you think about the application overall?
When we talk about the impact now, we identify two areas. One is what I just spoke about, which was condensing the time in the actual video. And the second was we have made the decision actually not to address it in terms of the written application. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Number one, no disrespect, but admissions consultants have been helping applicants for many, many, many years.
Right.
Fair.
And so, just how much a particular candidate wrote of their essays has sort of always been a question.
Right.
And so now we're just not replacing them by any means, but we're just adding now perhaps these chatbots. We also see that it's everywhere.
Yeah.
And so it has something like using a ChatGPT has very quickly become like using spell check.
Right.
And so we have chosen not to make any statements about using it or not, asking people to commit to using it. Right. But what we say every chance we get is that we want applicants to be themselves.
Right.
This whole process is about giving applicants the opportunity to tell us who they truly are. And as the process gets along for us to share more about the school. The worst thing in the world that could ever happen is for somebody to show up on campus on day one and look around and say, what am I doing here?
Right. This isn't specific to MIT Sloan, but I know during the pandemic, obviously, a lot of the testing requirements relaxed. I feel like MIT Sloan is a more data-driven program, and there's data now on how those students did. And is it a data-driven decision to go back to the GMAT? Like if the data had proven that the GMAT was irrelevant, would we have dropped it?
This sort of sounds like a little bit of a contradiction than what I said before. But the more data we have to help support whether or not we think a candidate can be successful in our program, the better. And so GMAT or GRE provides us with that additional piece of information.
So it's still a valued piece of the puzzle.
It is still
for you.
very much valued. We still do have a waiver. The waiver now is truly for people who aren't able to take an exam. In the world we live today, there are people in war zones, and so that's really what we're seeing more of the requests for. The other interesting thing, and this is God's honest truth, we have actually had people who over the years have asked for a waiver. We've given it to them. Then they've turned us down and told us that they're going to school X, who we know does not have a waiver.
Right.
So people have made the decision, I'm not really, I don't feel good enough about my score, I'm not going to submit it. So situations like that have also sort of pushed us in the direction of, we will now continue to always have a waiver for extreme circumstances, but we like having that additional piece of information.
So really, MIT Sloan has a two-tiered application process, if I can call it that.
Yes, you can.
Yeah. In the sense of, okay, you do the cover letter, you do the video, you have the resume, you have one recommendation. I guess there's a possibility of others people being called, but one recommendation. At that point, then, that's if they want to interview. You decide you want to interview someone. What happens next at that point?
When we decide to interview, they then have to submit 2 additional pieces of information within 24 hours prior to the interview itself. All of our interviews now are actually over Zoom.
Okay.
Which I will be honest, we always used to be in person before the pandemic. When the pandemic hit, we went to virtual. I was the first one to say, I really want to go back. I can't wait to go back to in-person interviews. I have come to understand and appreciate a couple of business reasons that I'll share as to why virtual is in fact better actually for the candidates in many cases. We feel very comfortable in our ability to assess virtually. What this does is it really makes it a truly even playing field. As much as we traveled for interviews, we never got to every city. And so inviting somebody to come to London, but they were living in Paris or they were living in Berlin, that's an incremental cost to them that others perhaps did not have to incur. Right. And so by making them all truly virtual, and we've even made the decision, you're across the street from Sloan. Yeah. We don't even want people to be able to have that advantage. Right. So all interviews, regardless, are virtual. And I'm actually very comfortable with that now. So the interview itself is virtual.
And the interview itself is a comprehensive interview, meaning you've seen a lot about the candidates.
Yep.
It's not a blind interview. You've read the application.
Yes, we have. I will get to that in a second. 2 additional pieces of information that you have to submit. The first one is a brief essay around a time when you've contributed to either increasing or enhancing the diversity of a team or group or organization. Diversity is a key component of our mission and of our mission statement. We've had this particular essay now, I'm going to say probably going on almost 10 years.
Okay.
I mean, for a very, very long time.
Right.
Probably back in 2019, actually it was before the pandemic, so it was probably 2019, we added our second, which is a data visualization.
Right.
Again, very similar to our thinking around the videos.
Yeah.
We live in a data-driven world.
Right.
People are spending hours on their phones looking at memes and pictures and things that really make an impact. Why not ask our applicants to share one with us,
Right.
either one that you have created on your own, perhaps a dashboard for work,
Right.
or something that you've seen that has really caught your attention,
Right.
and very briefly explain to us what this is
Right.
and why this is important to you.
Yeah. Across every school, there is literally nothing that's like the data slide at MIT.
I love that. I love the data visualization. For interviewers, and I can speak for myself, that is my icebreaker.
Yeah.
With every one of my interviewees, aside from hello, how are you? I'm taking notes, so my head will be down. I'm actually in the middle of interviewing, so it comes very naturally to me right now. Do you have any updates?
Right.
Then the first thing I ask them to do is walk me through their data visualization. It's actually an opportunity for people to share something they're passionate about or they're interested in.
Right.
And I promise you, they run the gamut. From the purest of social, we once received a data visualization that was the hot spots of Double Jeopardy.
Okay.
All the way through, housing costs and healthcare and climate,
Right,
you name it. And so and some of them are one picture, and some of them are dozens of graphs, whatever. They really run the gamut.
Do you get points when it comes to data slide? Do you get points for complexity?
I wouldn't say so. You know what you get
Points for
points
simplification, for simplicity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You get points for taking a really complex idea and explaining it in very simple terms.
Right. Then okay.
And more
Okay,
often
makes
than
sense.
not, I actually like a data visualization that I don't understand.
Okay.
And it's really a good challenge to see once we're done. I'm not going to understand all of it,
Right.
but did I get something out of what they shared with me? Okay. That's actually really meaningful, and that's a really important skill set to have in the world we live in today.
Right. That certainly makes sense. So again, a candidate who's about to interview with you sends to you the diversity essay. They send to you the data slide.
Yep.
At that point, then 24 hours later, they're in front of you.
Yep.
So let's start off. How have you prepared? How do you think about that interview?
One other thing. The assignments of interviews are completely blind.
Okay.
Completely. As an interviewer, I'm giving my time slots to our evaluation team, and they are putting them in our tool and slate simply with my available times. When somebody is given an invitation to interview with us, they get a link to all available time slots.
That's interesting. You can end up anywhere.
They have no idea who is interviewing them.
Yeah.
None. Now, we intentionally make sure we have time zone friendlies for the whole world.
Right.
And so one of my favorite time slots is 7 a.m. to 9:30 a.m., 5 interviews, boom, right, first thing in the day. Having said that, do I tend to get people perhaps from Asia? Yes.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, it's all very random. We want to make sure that we never create a situation where somebody's only option is to interview at 3 a.m.
Right.
Ever.
Right.
That is not our intention at all. So they're completely random. Yeah. They then receive a link in their interview, and it's Zoom. So you show up 5 minutes early, you're in a waiting room, and then the interview, 30 minutes.
Yeah.
I actually really like to refer to them as conversations. I think that's so much less intimidating.
Right, sure is.
I completely understand that people are nervous, and one of my personal first goals is to ensure that people feel comfortable and that they're really able to engage in a nice conversation over the next 30 minutes. It doesn't mean it's any less important. I once, you remember certain things. In our old building, we had a waiting area. And so I once went to meet a woman who I was interviewing and to walk her back to my office. And when I was walking her back to my office, I was perhaps a little bit more relaxed than she liked. I was cracking jokes or making something. And she looked at me and she said, why are you like making jokes? This is really serious. And it was sort of a reminder to me that for you, the interviewee, this is very important. And so there's a balance. I never want to disrespect what this is, but I also want people to feel comfortable in having a conversation.
Right. That makes sense.
Before the interview, I have in fact reviewed the entire file.
As you're talking about reviewing the entire file, maybe I'm taking you down the wrong road as you're talking about the interview, but is it important to you, how much that applicants are showing a lot of engagement with the school? I mean, are you checking how many emails they open or how many events they sign up for? Or, I mean, is it a volume play? I mean,
honestly, I'm going to say those aren't the first thing we look at. But we are very fortunate in the sense that we tend to end up at every phase with more qualified people than we can move on to that next phase. And so when we're looking to make some of those decisions, we will in fact look to see if they've attended any of our events. It's a couple of factors. One is, are they really interested?
Right.
That's really hard to say. Have they put in the effort?
Yeah.
I think that's probably a more compelling reason.
No, that makes sense.
And in many cases they have. Now, recognizing that there are many ways for them to engage with us. And so we want to make sure we've covered our bases. An example is, we will go and visit consulting firms, let's say. And when we go and visit a consulting firm, we don't always get the list of all their attendees. So we don't do anything automatically. So we may look to say, this person, they work for consulting firm X, we visited there, there's probably a chance so we wouldn't necessarily ding them for that. But there are certainly people who seem pretty strong, have not engaged with us at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We have one seat left. It's probably not theirs.
Right.
No, that makes sense. That absolutely makes sense then.
There's so many ways to engage these days. As an outcome of the pandemic, we literally probably at least a third, if not half of all of our events are virtual. Right. So regardless of where you are in the world, regardless of your time zone, there's at least a coffee chat or application tips webinar that you can connect with to learn more about us and to demonstrate your interest.
Okay, so someone is in the room with you, in this case, the virtual room.
Yep.
Yeah, what are you looking for, actually?
The conversation tends to be a series of behavioral questions. Okay. After we do the data, overall, what are we looking for? We're looking for personal presence. We're looking for ability to engage in a conversation. We're looking for, knowledge of Sloan as we get further into the conversation. We're asking a series of behavioral questions. Yep. Tell me about a time you had to convince an individual or a group to do something one way and they wanted to do it the other way. So real experiences we want people to be able to explain to us. Sure. Eventually, we're getting to why is now the right time for you to pursue an MBA?
Right.
Believe it or not, we have people, I'm going to say 2 to 8 or 9 year range, and everybody has a different reason why now is the right time. I think that's interesting to know.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you hope to get out of an MBA experience? And then, of course, why MIT Sloan? And then finally, I always, and I'm sure my team does also, always leaves time for individuals to ask us a question or two. And I encourage people to have questions. And in fact, I've been getting a couple of the exact same question worded the exact same way by people. I'm like, is there something out there in a blog somewhere with suggested questions? So it's a nice, sometimes 30 minutes goes by really, really fast. And guess what? Sometimes it doesn't.
I can imagine.
The other thing I would also say that was, I don't think people should get hung up in that exact 30 minutes. I know when something's virtual, you see the clock and the time. Mm-hmm. Sometimes in 20 minutes, I've realized that you're an amazing candidate. And sometimes 20 minutes, I've realized you're not.
Right.
So don't go and, complain again in the blogs that you didn't get your full 30 minutes.
Right. What would you say to an applicant who sort of feels like MIT has this, reputation, obviously due to the parent institution as well, of being, incredibly scientific and data-driven, and doesn't have that experience, maybe a speechwriter per se.
Or someone come out of politics.
Yeah.
This is what I say. I think we live in a data-driven world. I think if you look at any MBA core curriculum, you're going to see a significant number of data-driven courses. You're going to see microeconomics. You're going to see accounting. You're going to see a course that we call DMD, Data Models and Decisions, where you learn how to model and solve for any problem. That is the world we live in today. That is not what distinguishes MIT Sloan. What distinguishes MIT Sloan is everything after the core. Well, first and foremost, it's because we have a one-semester core. But then beyond that, what you do with those next 3 semesters, that's what distinguishes us. The MIT and MIT Sloan, the opportunity to take classes throughout the institute, to participate in clubs, conferences, competitions, you name it, to really build an experience to meet whatever your personal goals are. That's what distinguishes us.
Right. I guess, and that's true. I mean, I always say, people always say, like, to us, I don't want to go to whatever MIT or Chicago. It's too quant focused. It's like every school is quant focused. It's a quantitative degree, but in terms of communicating your abilities and if you don't have the raw, I mean, you're gonna somewhere you need to communicate that through your GMAT, through your GPA somewhere, but I mean, clearly there's room in the pool for someone who's got, doesn't have like raw quantitative experience in their day-to-day every day in the professional environment.
So there absolutely is. There are people out there who received what we call a conditional admit. There's things about this person we really admire and think they'd be a great addition to the community, yet for their benefit, we think they should take a math class. And so it's part of our letter, their decision letter is we recommend classes that you have to take. We give a minimum requirement for taking it with a date. And so absolutely. We admit people with all different backgrounds.
Right.
All different backgrounds, yet we want to make sure there's like a level playing field when everybody enters so everybody is best positioned to be successful. In addition to that, though, what we do is, and I'm not sure this is unique to Sloan, to be honest, is we have cohorts and core teams. So we have 6 cohorts that first semester where you're taking all your classes together. And within that cohort, you're part of a 6-person core team. Those cohorts are designed to pretty much be representative of a mini class. So percentage women should reflect percentage women in each, percentage international, etc. And then within those core teams, we're really looking to balance experience as well, recognizing that most likely there's at least one consultant in every group who really knows how to do the presentations. There's somebody who is an accounting major who is frustrated that they have to take accounting again, but perhaps this time they're helping all of their peers out as opposed to just doing it on their own. Core teams do everything together that first semester, submit all their homeworks together, everything. And so that's another way to take people with different backgrounds and try to really balance it out over that first semester.
If I come to you with something I'll call sort of more of a poet's profile, I used to work in government. Jeremy used to work as a speechwriter.
As well as a speechwriter,
yeah. Is there something I really need to be showing? Do I, as a poet, need to really be showing my application?
I think what we will call, can we say quant comfort, a certain quant comfort level, which could happen in many ways. So it could, in fact, have been from classes you took as an undergrad. It could be from work, the type of work that you've been doing. It could be from passions you have outside of work. We just need to see evidence of your level of comfort so then we're comfortable that you can be successful in a Sloan classroom.
And sort of looking back many, many years ago when I applied to Sloan, as part of the optional essay, I had the opportunity to actually submit a document, and I submitted my thesis. And that had a lot of calculus in it. And I think that's what got me in, to be perfectly honest with you.
We don't ask for any additional documentation these days.
Oh, yikes.
No,
not anymore, at least.
Nope.
Dawna, when it comes to waitlisting people.
Yes.
Yep. I've always gotten this sense that MIT might waitlist more people than average. Is that a great... Is that aligned with how you think about it?
We have no restrictions on it at all. We waitlist people because, again, we're in a situation where we have more qualified people who we think would be great additions to our school than we necessarily have seats.
Right.
And as we all know, things happen. Right. There are certain people who apply to multiple schools, and therefore they're going to accept one offer and decline others. If somebody is waitlisted, we truly believe that they could, in fact, be a great addition to our program. Right. At that particular moment, we did not have a seat for them.
Okay. Is there something that they can be doing to enhance their likelihood of acceptance?
Yes, they can continue to show us their interest. We greatly appreciate people's continued interest and patience. Right. Sending us periodic updates is actually pretty important.
No, that makes sense.
What we have is we will have a waitlist chat a couple of days after decisions go out, and we are very clear
Yeah.
about people are welcome to send us periodic updates. We have it almost fairly automated.
That makes sense.
And between round 1 and round 2, we look at round 1 waitlist as part of our round 2 pool.
Okay.
Which is very different
Yes.
than let's look at the round 2. If we have any extra seats, then we'll go to the wait list.
Okay.
At any point in time, our goal is to admit the most qualified people. And it's very possible for round 1 waitlist candidates to, in fact, be more qualified than round 2 candidates.
So it leads me to a natural spot, which is one of my favorite admissions quotes of all times, comes from your predecessor, Rod Garcia, who once said to me, "A rejection is not a life sentence." And I thought that was such a pithy, clever way of putting reapplicants at ease. Throw a bone to the reapplicant community out there.
So I interviewed a reapplicant yesterday, who will definitely be an admit vote for me this year. Again, so 2 things. One is, I sound like a broken record, but we just don't always have enough seats. So we have some really strong people who come September 1, there wasn't a seat for them. It doesn't mean that the following year there wouldn't be one. And there were people who weren't ready yet, that we didn't have enough evidence. And so they go and they work another year or 2. They further develop certain skills, continue to increase their impact, and then they're ready. So there's a variety of reasons why a reapplicant is a really good candidate for us. Do, in fact, there's no automatic red flag for a reapplicant.
How much of an advantage is it to apply to an earlier round?
Unless there's a life change, I would not wait for a round 3.
Yeah.
Round 1 versus round 2, it's really minor. It's always better, given all things being equal, it's always better to apply in an earlier round.
Yeah.
It just gives you more opportunities, like we just described.
Why have the 3rd round if it's so improbable at that point?
People who we usually admit in a round 3 is somebody who most likely was going to apply the next year, and then some life event happened. So they're very strong people who have just accelerated, as opposed to people who've delayed.
Right.
What do you say someone who's looking at your application a little bit intimidated? It feels a little different.
Don't be intimidated.
Look how nice Dawna is. Don't be intimidated.
Don't be intimidated. Go for it. Yeah. The only thing that's certain is if you don't apply, you're not going to get in.
Yeah.
Anything else is possible.
Okay, then. Good words to end on right here. Dawna, thank you very much for joining us today.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you
so much. A lot of fun.
Absolutely. And you can also listen to Dawna's podcast about what makes MIT unique. And we'll
leave it at that.
Leave it at that.
Thanks so much. Thanks again.
Perfect.